Welcome to Brands on Tap, the podcast where we discuss all things brand related.
So whether you're a business owner, industry expert, or simply interested, this podcast is for you.
Hi guys, welcome to another episode of Brands on Tap. And today's episode we're going to be talking about what it takes to build a website. And the first phase is going to be talking about research and planning. So one of the things you need to consider when you're building a website is doing some research. So as much research as you possibly can in your sector, but also outside of your sector. So looking at various different websites, the do's and don'ts, what you like, what you dislike, and relaying that information to an agency such as ours. So that's a good place to start, is the research phase. We will do our own research as well, and we know pretty much like most industries, but you'll know your industry far better than we will. So being pre-armed with that information when you come to us will certainly be really useful. So yeah, doing the research and then also doing the planning. So planning the website and really identifying what it needs to achieve, what type of website it needs to be right from the get-go. So does it need to be a portfolio website? Does it need to be e-commerce? Does it need to be a blog? Does it need to be a brochure type website? And also working out roughly the type of information that you're going to need to portray on your website. And that will dictate roughly how many pages, what the site structure might need to be. So that's a really good place to start, is looking at the type of website that you really need to have, and then working out roughly what kind of information you want to try and get across. And then that arm us, or agencies like us, with that information. So it gives us a very good starting point then. But we'll sit down and have a proper planning meeting with you anyway. And we'll do our own research, as I mentioned, and we'll sit down and work out with you what the best site structure needs to be.
Yeah, I think that's pretty much covered most of it, actually. The main purpose of the planning and research phase from my point of view would be essentially establishing that the website is going in the right direction for the business, considering business goals and objectives, so whether the business is looking to grow or whether they're standing still. If they're standing still, they shouldn't stand still, but we have had experience where certain businesses do for a period. They don't have that vision, they don't have that foresight into where they want to take the business, so as a result they just kind of go day to day, and we're trying to build a website that aligns with that, but it's very difficult if there's no kind of vision or marketing objectives that for us to know whether the website's actually performing or helping that business. And like Paul alluded to, budget wise, if the client comes to us with a very low budget to start with, it's usually an indication that they haven't thought it through correctly, or that vision isn't there, and that the website's worth very little to them and they don't really see it doing a lot for the business. And for us, it's a marketing tool, so it's really important in the planning and research phase that we establish with them and make them understand and are very clear about what the website's trying to do and why it should cost what it costs.
I mean, it is the importance of the website, isn't it? I mean, for many companies, it is their shop window.
Yeah.
So it is putting a value on, if you want to drive traffic to your business,
sure, then
what would you be willing to spend in order to drive traffic and inquiries and sales and sell products or services or whatever you're selling, to your target audience?
100%.
Because if you're not prepared to spend the money, and your website is literally just sat there, and you're not driving traffic to it, it's not structured in the right way,
complete waste
where
of money.
You're structured in the right way so that you're driving traffic to it, and it's easy to navigate, then you'll lose customers, So you can't have a website just sat there not trying to achieve anything. Every website should be trying to achieve something, even if it's trying to deliver information in the correct way, or it's trying to drive inquiries or sell products, or whatever it is. But it certainly needs to be working hard for you, and it's what you value that website as part of your sales tools, if you like.
Yeah.
It's what you value that as in monetary terms. Because if you come to us and you want a website for a couple of grand, we can't do it. The amount of time it takes us to do the planning phase alone, we just wouldn't be able to do it. And so we want to do something that delivers for you and produces a return for you. Return on investment is absolutely where we're from. Yeah.
And I think that's that's the objective of the first phase. The planning and research phase is to establish everything we've talked about, make sure the return on investment is brought up and discussed, so that we're not doing that retrospectively. Make sure who's going to look after the website, what's the website for. All those important decisions and discussions are basically had at the first stage of the development of the site, so that we don't go too far down the road and kind of build something that's either wrong or incorrectly costed, or that the client doesn't understand the value of. I think that for us, that's the real importance of the first phase.
Yeah. So the planning ultimately is the key phase.
Yeah.
We spend as long on the planning phase as we do on the build.
We do.
Sometimes longer, doing the research, sitting with the client, going through exactly what the site needs to achieve, look at their target audience, look at competitors, looking at site structure, layout, all those kind of things, the do's and don'ts. And that whole planning phase alone, as I say, needs to be very well considered and shouldn't be brushed over. It's very important to an effective website.
Yeah, agreed. Okay, so moving on to phase 2, we're talking about domain names and hosting. So essentially, a domain name is how your website is recognized and what someone's typing in to access it. So
domain name, you're also talking URL, web address?
Yes, so domain name, URL, web address, whatever you want to refer to it as. Essentially, that's the go-to point that somebody would engage with your website. So essentially, it's the address, the location they would enter into the browser of choice to access
Google.
your Google Chrome, or Arc now, to access your website. So again, some people have been clever with domain names in the past and try to get keywords in there and things like that. But nowadays, the general rule of thumb is something that's easy to remember, something that's quite simple to type in. No one wants to type in a really long domain name regardless of where it is or how it's used. A shorter name is always going to be more beneficial, and something that avoids cheating when you can't get the domain you want. So are you putting hyphens in there or getting an extension that's not right for you?
Actually, on that note, the hyphen side of things, is that detrimental to a website or not?
So physically, no, in terms of the technical aspects of it, but there is a very historical reference to a human angle and a Google angle that basically sees the address as something you couldn't get properly, so you've had to hyphenate it. Right. So essentially, if you're looking for example, for our agency, whitespace.com, or as we've now got, whitespace.agency, and you can't get that, you would look at things like, okay, white-space or whitespace-agency.com. And really what that always meant from the very early days of registering domains was that you couldn't get the one you wanted. So obviously Google knew that, and it said, why are you using a hyphen when you don't have to? And just put a blanket rule in to say, okay, it's because you've got a domain essentially that you couldn't register the one you wanted.
Well, actually, on that note, I mean, whenever you're trying to create a new business, for instance, it's always beneficial to go and search for the domain that you want.
Completely right. Yeah.
Because we've seen it all too often where people have created new businesses and then they go to register a domain, either in the UK it'd be normally a .co.uk, for instance, and the domain name's not available. So then they end up either hyphenating, spelling the name of the business differently or something like that.
True.
Which is fine, but then you then got to change the name of your business in order to reflect that. And if you don't, there's obviously a disconnect. So your target audience, your customers, aren't going to know which web address semantically to type in.
They're not.
So definitely finding out right from the get-go when you've got a name in your head for a new business or a new product, let's say, do your research, see whether the domain name's available, and then if it is, then obviously you're good to go.
Yeah, that's a very good point. And I think something that's very commonly overlooked, because you think maybe a little bit too late down the road about what your website should be, what its purpose is, and then what its name's going to be. And I think that that's something that's very commonly overlooked. So it's a good point. And also, on collateral these days, you would use Google, you'd use a search engine, you can use voice search, so you could find people's websites through links. You don't have to physically type everything in anymore. We're not still in the the kind of very old MS-DOS.
Good old Siri.
Good old Siri, yeah, she'll save you. Other voice activated services are available.
Yeah, true.
Not
in my household.
Not in your household. So yeah, you've got that obviously assistance there that these search engines will try and help you along the way. But I think there's no excuse for getting the right domain. If you've got a clear domain that's easy to write, it's easy to remember.
Yeah.
When you're using it on marketing collateral, when you're using it on anything you're sharing, or something where someone's got to repeat that domain that they see it, having the shorter and easier to remember domain is always going to benefit.
It even aids us in terms of collateral doing design work.
Yeah, sure.
That countless times I've done work for businesses already established with a very long domain name, and their email address is equally as long.
Yeah.
And then we do business cards or do brochures or whatever, and then trying to fit that domain onto a piece of collateral is just insane.
Yeah, so, agreed.
Yeah, that's where it does become just too difficult.
Cumbersome
really.
And difficult to.
So yeah, trying to keep it short, memorable,
for sure,
will help you in more ways than one.
Yeah. And obviously people have issues, like dyslexia is very common, and if someone mistyped it, or a letter was wrong, or even misread it, or if it went past them quickly on a bus, or they pass it quickly, you don't want something that people are going to mistype. They could end up at someone else's address, or essentially just perform a Google search that leads them to someone else's website. So I think that's really the important part of the domain. The only other thing to cover is the extensions. So we've got various extensions like .co.uk, .com, .org.uk, and more so now the kind of more broader extensions like we've explored. So .agency.
Yeah, that's a cool one.
That's a very cool one. Yeah, .agency. Yeah, it'd be nice to get one of those, wouldn't it? Yeah, so obviously these have kind of evolved over time. Nowadays, the extensions with .agency are trying to contextualize the domains. Yep. So again, whilst they're not abundantly clear of .co.uk, that's a UK business, .com, that's a global business, .org.uk, that's an organisation, .gov.uk, that's a government organisation.
We do a number of them.
We do a number of them, yes, we sure do.
Yeah.
So the .agency, essentially, whilst it doesn't clarify your location and your area, what it is doing is trying to contextualise the purpose of the business. It's a new kind of wave in Google's kind of indexing and the way the web is trying to move, to try and create kind of a broader choice, I suppose, of domains, because the trouble is with the years gone by, .co.uk, .com, the common ones are getting very saturated as well, so the choice there is a lot more limited. So by opening up an opportunity to try and add the context of your business, it's kind of performing a directory like logic from Google's point of view. So
how does that compare then? Say you had like us, for instance, a .agency. Say you had a different name extension for your business. Like I know that you got go.compare now. So how does that help a business in terms of like Google rankings? Is it still better to get the .co.uk and if it's available the .com as well, or solely just use saying go.compares?
Yeah, it's a very good question actually. I think go.compare have got the edge because I suppose, like ourselves, once you become established enough that people know you and they're not completely baffled by your name and your experience, then doing that is a really brave move, but it's also a very confident move from their part. They know they're confident enough to say, this is our domain now. You've only got to type in go.compare. It's brilliant for marketing collateral. It means they can share it and people don't have to type in a convoluted domain. They don't have an unnecessary extension, which could be argued .com, .co.uk. Whilst it localizes that address, it is largely unnecessary because it's not actually adding to the company itself.
Yeah.
It's just a function that the web's always said, you need this is how the web works.
Yeah.
So I think having the more contextual domains is a really good move forward.
Yeah.
And like for ourselves, we've got .agency, so someone can see immediately, okay, the purpose of us is an agency, which for me is a very useful thing for someone to know before they visit the website.
Yeah.
Okay, they don't necessarily know where we are, but you could go down a whole, which would be another podcast, you could go down a whole technical convoluted conversation about how Google contextualizes, and not just Google, any search engine I might add, contextualizes where you are and the location of you. So it should know locations based on your Google place, your card, the address on your website. It will give people the local results they need, even if you haven't got a .co.uk. It's not, we're not in the early noughties now where that is absolutely paramount. But what I can't sit here and say is, you're going to get an absolutely equal result with a .agency that you would with a .co.uk, because unfortunately the technology is just so uncertain. It changes from one year to the next. But that's how I've understood the purpose of them, and that's how I would advise a client of it. And I think it is weighing up the odds, and like you said, if you've got it on a lot of marketing collateral, it's adding context to the website. For me, that's a big plus in both of those aspects.
So ideally, what you're saying is we could do with a whitespace.agency.devon.kingskersall address. Is that right?
If that was available, essentially get as many as you can, because like you alluded to earlier, if you don't get the .com and you don't get the .co.uk, somebody else might. We can go down a whole nother podcast of trademarking and claiming authority.
That's one coming up.
But essentially that would then become a legal issue rather than just let's secure the domains because other people might get them. And like we said, it's essentially a directory listing. So if you've got one directory listing, .agency, another company's got .com, .co.uk, .uk, they've got 3 or 4 more directory listings than we have. So regardless of how well we hope we rank, we've still got that competition chomping at the bit to try and get to where we are.
So it's still better to try and bag the .co.uk
100%.
and the .com if you possibly can.
Anything relevant to your industry and what you do is always recommended. But like you said earlier, it's not always as easy as that. They're often taken, or there's a price attributed to them, or you've got to negotiate with them. It's a very difficult thing to get the classic domains.
So we then come on to hosting. So not all hosts are the same, are they? As we've found out over the years.
We sure have.
So
and there's a lot of politics around hosting as well at the moment with WordPress in regards to the system that we build all our websites on, or 95% of our websites on would be WordPress, and there's a lot of kind of ownership politics around that at the moment, which again we won't go into, but it's worth touching on when we're talking about hosting. So essentially you want something that's pro the environment and proactive. So some hosting companies out there would just provide you very cheap hosting, very appealing hosting for somebody that doesn't know about hosting because of the price, or they get you on the first year and then they ramp it up again, or they bolt it into when you buy a domain, they catch somebody at that point and say, while you're here, why don't you host your site with us? It's £1 or something, and you think, brilliant. But actually what you're missing is, as we said earlier, is that able to support the website that you're building? Are your clients or visitors going to get...
What do you mean by that? Is it able to support...
So essentially what I'm saying is the scale of the website. So if you think of hosting like a computer, if you buy a very cheap basic computer and you run a couple of bits of software on it, chances are it's going to be okay. It will handle it. But if you then start installing more advanced software on it, or you start pushing it, or it starts getting full with images or content or videos, that computer is very quickly going to slow up. It might crash, it might outperform in certain areas, and then suddenly just stop working. So I think it's that unreliability of that host that you're paying very low money for, being able to support you if and when your site scales. And like we said in the planning phase, we'd always look to scale our clients' sites. So we want an environment where they're going to be taken care of. The scalability is an option and no problem at all. And if they do need that bigger computer, as we described it, we can assist them with that and provide that necessary equipment, CPU power, GPU power, to basically create an environment where the website's not going to go down. And also not be very slow and sluggish for the end user. So that's kind of a prerequisite, but it's something you won't get with cheaper hosts. They'll stick you on a shared computer, if you like. So you'll be on what's referred to as a server, but it's essentially a computer where you'll be sharing that with other people. So that
And a lot of other people.
They won't disclose how many, but the cheaper the hosting, it's usually because you're cutting corners on lots of things.
And the disadvantage of that is sharing it, like all your, say, 1,000 websites, let's say, on a computer. The downside of that is,
obviously, if you're on the same server or computer, as I've referred to it as another company or another person that's not protecting their website, if something happened to their website, it could potentially detrimentally affect yours. The server could crash because of their website, takes your website down, and it's very common. You see it with the cheaper hosts, the shared hosting, the hosting that doesn't offer the facilities or the options that we would do. They're not sustainable, they're not environmentally friendly, and whilst that might not be vital for everybody, I think it does show that their mind and their growth is in the right place as a business. Because
so we're using Crystal.
So we're using Crystal, so they're 100% green powered, so that means all the energy comes from green resources. So it's the only one at the moment. Hopefully others will follow, but it's the only one that does that at the moment. So we can be really confident and rest assured that what we're doing is trying to make an effort for the environment.
Exactly.
And often people don't think hosting, you don't associate hosting with being that resourceful, but as we described it, as if you do think of it as computers and they're running your website and serving it to people, there's a lot of power needed there to generate en masse thousands and thousands of websites. That's a huge energy resource. So the more we can do to kind of use green power and cut that back, the bigger effect that's going to have on
and I think every business needs to be environmentally friendly aware anyway, even if they're not B Corp or anything like that. So hosting is a big part of that. You're driving a lot of traffic to your website. You need to ensure that you're trying to, at least on that side, in print, wherever your touch points in your business are, as environmentally friendly as possible.
100%. And obviously nobody can guarantee anything's going to always be 100% up from a website's point of view, so 100% hosted, because unforeseen things can happen, lightning strikes, or a very rare server attack or something could happen on any host globally. So you can't possibly say any host is 100% secure. But what you can do is make an effort to ensure it's backed up, and that the WordPress side of things, which is what we tend to build on, is covered and secure. So everything we can do that's possibly available to update it, or the latest security patches, latest security updates are always run on everything we do. And then you've got this kind of marketing phrase that's circulating at the moment, which is managed hosting and managed WordPress, which really doesn't mean anything in itself. It's what the company decides to do for you for that price. And too often you can see these companies popping up saying we offer managed hosting, we offer managed WordPress, and actually what it means is there's some software maybe somewhere that's doing a few updates for you, or somebody sat there in a support team that may or may not answer a ticket related to WordPress. But actually the managed part can mislead people and think it's safe, it's covered, I'm good to go. And actually you don't really know what they're doing for that. So they add more money on top of it, and it can still just be as vulnerable as before. So I think to sum up phase 2, it's the importance of the domains and the importance of picking the right hosting.
So the next part is website design, UI, UX, and wireframing. So the UI, user interface, that's what it stands for, and UX being user experience. So essentially the first part that we would conduct, and loads of agencies do things differently, but we tend to start with a website build, looking at the UI, so the user interface. So before we start looking at the actual design and layout, we start to look at the wireframing. So we look at the site structure, how are people going to navigate through your website in essence. So this is quite a detailed process. So you're looking at all the information that needs to go on to every page, and how that page needs to be constructed, and then we assess how are people going to navigate through those pages. So having a wireframe, literally you can do it on a piece of paper, or we can do it electronically, whichever, but as long as you do the wireframe process. So if I click on this page, where is it going to take me? click on a button on that page, it's going to take me to here. Okay, on this page it's got a button. Where's that button going to take you? So the navigation, the ease of use, is part of the UI side of things. So just identifying really like the user experience and making sure that every detail of that user experience is very well thought out. So how they're going to navigate through your website needs to be very seamless and very semantic. So if you've got drop down menus, for instance, or menu bar at the top, it's got to be very easy to navigate. Try and minimize the amount of clicks to get through to key areas of your website as well.
Yeah.
So don't, create pages that are, so far down, or bits of information that are so far down that might take you 10 or 20 clicks to get through, and they may be key parts of your business that you want to try and get across to your target audience. All this forms part of the UI, basically the user interface, and just trying to make things as concise as possible, basically. So we do that first, identifying the navigation, the ease of use, how people are going to navigate your website, and we do it with wireframes.
Yeah.
So on from that, then you can start looking at the actual design process. And so this is still part of the user experience, or sorry, user interface, and just making sure that every element has been considered. So that can be colors, it can be typefaces, even the layout of the page, how the images are going to be stacked or laid out on the page.
Yeah.
So all these factors need to be drawn together, and we would say, as a sort of brand and marketing agency, also consider the brand and make sure that during that process that the brand style, the brand imagery, the brand ethos, even the tone of voice and typography is very well considered and is on brand with the other collateral that you have. All too often we see sometimes websites that are so far disconnected from the brand style of the main brand image, and you wonder why they've gone through that process. So yeah, making sure that everything is on brand. This is where brand guideline documents are really important. So when we're creating a new brand for a business, we don't just look at it in isolation, for a piece of collateral. It might be a brochure or whatever. We're looking at it for social, for web, for every type of marketing touch point, basically. So yeah, please bear that in mind when building a website. The UI side of things is very important. Make sure you get the wireframing right. Make sure your website is very easy to navigate before moving on to the design process.
Yeah. Okay. I think that's pretty much covered a lot of the UX and the UI side of things. So obviously, just sort of adding to what Paul said, the UX is really obviously the experience that the user is going to get, and the two things always cross over. So UI and UX. The UI is like the clothing, the dressing on the actual website, so the branding side, the look and feel.
Yeah.
But the experience is obviously what the user feels when they're on the site. So it's a kind of fancy acronyms of UI and UX thrown around a lot. So, but what it essentially, equates to is, as Paul's said, the UI is the design, it's how it looks, it's the style, and the UX is what the user's kind of feeling as they go through the site. So how frustrated are they to use things? Are they getting the right information in the right order? Too often websites are built skipping these stages.
Yeah.
And you just do things on a whim. You don't think them through. You don't consider your audience. You don't think, what's the purpose, say, a homepage? What's the purpose of the homepage? What's the most important message? What's the second message? What's the third message? Where's the trust building on it? Why are people going to use you? What are they seeing that's making them interested in you above the other 8 sites they've been on?
Yeah.
Have you thought about the user? Are they feeling like you thought about the user? And I think whether you are fully aware of it or not, a good site to use and a good site to navigate, you know it when you're on it, and I think your audience does too. So regardless of how much time you feel this is kind of worth and how much time you would warrant to it, I think from experience, from our point of view, every site that we spend planning it and structuring it, the end result is far better every time. And it's like Paul was saying, it's like a design principle where you design for a purpose. You don't design just because things look nice. And I think the UX on a website is the purpose of it. And if you just skip it and you just say, let's just wing it and stick things in the page, it never works out, because there's just no structure to the site. So we would always look to put the UX together first and say, right, what's the purpose of them, as Paul has alluded to already, what's the purpose of the navigation? Does the navigation work on mobile? If I'm on a mobile, am I getting to the contact page quick enough? Am I seeing what I need to see? Can I play videos? If I scroll through certain areas, do I understand how they're supposed to engage? Do I know that I've got to scroll horizontally in certain bits? It's things like that where you've got to make sure that the site is clear and easy to use for a lot of different people. And I think that leads on to things like accessibility that we're really hot on as well. So you've got things like websites that don't include what's referred to as an ARIA label, which is essentially if you've got impairments or you can't see things or hear things correctly.
I can't see things.
Paul can't see things. That's why. Neither can I. That's why we wear these. Then obviously, if I had these off and everything was very blurry, I would potentially put a voiceover on, or I'd need some assistance to guide me through the website. And if we're missing ARIA labels, which are very in a web designer's language are very simple things to add, then by going through buttons, by going through posts, what's referred to as cards, which is little bits of information on a site, trying to navigate through those when the ARIA labels aren't present or the semantics aren't present is very, very difficult. And obviously it's not something that most people think about. They just use a mouse. Fully able people can use a mouse and they can go through. They don't care less about the accessibility, but it's very important for Google. And as an agency that provide websites, it's very important that we consider it as well. And your ranking will increase if you do it correctly, and the overall site structure is better for it. It's a lazy process to not do it. And Google sees it as that as well. It says, why have you not labeled this image? Why is this button not clear? Why is this element not clear? Why can't I navigate through it? So it's getting much better now of kind of picking you up on these faults. And I keep referring to Google because largely what's referred to as Lighthouse, which is the Google kind of go-to speed test, is generally accepted as the main way that you would test a website. So that is run and created by Google. So that's generally the one we want to impress the most.
But it's also, it's like you touched on earlier, that it's semantically naming things like buttons. I know it sounds like simple, but click me or click here or something means nothing to somebody that's got an impairment.
Exactly.
So if you say like click to reveal, click to download this document, then at least then they know exactly why I'm clicking on it.
Exactly. Yes, 100% that. And it's also things like, mega menus, which is essentially for another buzzword that people wouldn't necessarily know what it means. But when you're on a website and you hover over something and it drops down with multiple columns, it looks fancy. Visually, for someone that's fully able, and visually, even I struggle with some of them, to be honest. If there's more than sort of 20 links on a menu, you kind of question, do you need that many in there? But you can imagine somebody that's not fully able trying to fight their way through different columns and different items on a menu. They'd much rather have 5 succinct options on a drop down that they I know where I'm going, that's what I need, than be given 20, 30 links that they don't really know where they're supposed to be clicking on.
And this comes back to the planning phase.
It does. It absolutely does. So I think that's 100% the purpose of the UX and the UI phase. And the wireframing is to assist. Essentially, we've seen it firsthand that we want to create a semantic structure for the pages and the content on the website. So we don't want everything to be at the same level. And I'd liken this to kind of a folder structure on a computer. So you've got a desktop on the computer full of files. You wouldn't want everything to be random. You wouldn't want everything to be sporadic because you would struggle to find it. Somebody else comes in, they want to find something, they don't know where it is. You ask something to contextualize it. So in the eyes of Google, have a look at my desktop, it would think I don't know where anything is or what I'm seeing. I'm off and Paul needs to jump on my computer, he can't find anything. So it's that handover and semantic logic of the folder structure that we'd use on everything we do on our server or on our computers, so that if someone else jumps in they can find something. It's exactly the same with a website. So if you've got benefits to that business, you put them in a content area of benefits, so everything is clear. Google can see these are all benefits that business offers. I know what they are, you know what they are, someone else jumps in, they know where to find them. That's good housekeeping, but that's essentially the bread and butter of wireframing a website. Is creating that structure so that it's sound. And if the client wants to grow the site, we can add more content to it. Everything's organized. It's very easy to do. So that's really the purpose of stage 3.
So the next phase, stage 4, is looking at the copywriting side of things. It's an area or content creation, and basically the copywriting, getting the text right on the website, is a crucial element. It's something that just shouldn't be taken lightly, really. You need to spend some quality time working on your text for your website. It needs to come across in the way that you intend it to be for your target audience. So we, as a branding, marketing and web agency, we look quite heavily on the tone of voice. So this comes back to like the branding process, really, that how do you want to communicate with your target audience? You know, if you're very sort of factual type business, you might want to come across as very corporate and very factual. Whereas if you're selling like cakes, for instance, then you might want to come across as quite light and friendly, very informal. So the tone of voice really is very important, how you want to talk to your target audience.
Crucial, yeah.
And it's not something that should be skipped over. And it's something that, you know, even if you're considering using something like ChatGPT, for instance, these days, we would err against it. And the reason being, one, Google can penalize a website if it finds that content. They have like EA or AI algorithms, if you like, that can detect whether it's been written by an AI bot. So you don't want to try and create a website full of content that essentially could be penalizing your website. So you might want to use that as a starting point, let's say. We wouldn't say, you know, obviously disregard that by any means, but you could certainly take that as a starting point if you wanted to do the copy yourself. But where we would recommend is obviously you creating some content on outline content, even if it's just bullet points, and then giving it to somebody like us. And we have copywriters in-house that can write copy that's not just engaging, it also has the right tone of voice, and is going to be quite effective for your target audience. So as I say, the copy, the text on a website is crucially important. If they're going to land on your site, the messaging's all wrong, the headlines are a mess, then your site, people are going to land on it, and what are they going to do? No, this isn't for me, I'm going to go elsewhere, and they'll go and click on another 10 sites.
Yeah, which is usually the case. So as Paul was saying, copywriting obviously is really important. Over the years we've understood and seen various sites of different calibers. So we've seen sites that are badly written, seen sites that are very well written, and probably sites that are in between. The results of which do drastically vary. And as much as obviously we're a design agency and we would always encourage everything to look as good as it can, to be on brand, the website to look as smart as it possibly could do.
Like ours,
yeah. Without a doubt, like a good book, a website that contains very good copy can still convert people. And I think that's really precedent to how powerful copy can be. You can have a very basic looking website, but the copy, if the copy is inspirational or it touches something that you believe in, then I think it can still make you convert very well. It can still work as a functional website, and people aren't going to say, I don't want to use this because the design's not the best one I've seen out of the last 8 sites. You know, if the message is there and they believe in the business and they read what they like, they're involved and they're on board. And I think if we can combine that with a site that is well designed and that is structurally sound and that does look good, you've got a winning combination.
I mean, the other thing to note as well on the copy side of things is that again, this touches on like the type of website, target audience.
Of
That
course.
if, say, your website needs to be very informative and it's got, it's very technical.
Yeah.
It doesn't necessarily mean to say that you need to have all that information on that one page. Talking about product, for instance, we see this time and time
Good
again,
point. Yeah.
where they have war and peace about a product, and aesthetically alone, people are going to look at that and think, blimey, it's going to take me an hour to read all that.
Completely agree.
So you can look at ways of how we're going to deliver that information.
Yeah.
Could we do it into some kind of infographic on the website? Could we do it in a way that there's a couple of short paragraphs, let's say, and then a read more button? So if you are interested, you can click on the read more, drop down or pop-up window or whatever. Then you get the rest of the information. Or does it need to be an information sheet?
Yeah.
So it could be a button. So a brief overview of what that information is, what it's going to deliver you, and then click on the button to download a PDF or some form of document.
And you're compartmentalizing the audience a bit more, so you're not saying this is, which is very common with a more science-driven client, of which we have a few, where you're aware that not every audience member that's viewing the site needs to get all that information. And somebody that's fresh to the product, fresh to the brand, it could overwhelm them. They could not know what they're reading, but there could be another audience type where they do need that, and that's what they're looking for. But you don't want to water down the whole website with just war and peace on one page, where you, like Paul said, you can bring in again the UX UI stage of that, so that the navigation and the organization of the content is far better. And you're also very aware again that people love a story, so you're essentially on every website you're trying to tell a story. You're not trying to bore people, you're not trying to overwhelm them with content. You're trying to tell them a story of why is our product better than someone else's, where's the trust, why use us, and what have we got to offer that they haven't. And I think that's the key fundamental of copywriting, is to get those elements nailed. And too often, if the page is seeming a bit long-winded or there's too much on it, it probably needs another page, and you're just being a bit lazy and you haven't made another page. And too often, that, like Paul was saying, with the read more buttons or with buttons that you can click on, it's also the same with a lot of websites that we see where there should be more pages. Because it, again, Google sees it as a lazy way out to just create everything on one page.
Or as a discipline as well, could you make that the amount of copy more concise?
Exactly.
Could you reduce it to half its size?
Yeah, exactly. And too often you can. It's waffling, or there's too much written on a page. And a good copywriter could come in and say, look, you don't need to say half of this. You don't need to use repetitive phrases like experts and professionals that we see on so many sites. Solutions, because it can act detrimentally in that, your visitors are already expecting you to be professionals or experts. They don't need to be told that 100 times on a page. It actually acts in the opposite way to say, why you keep telling me? You're almost trying to reassure yourself that you're an expert. So it's the psychology to an extent of copywriting, and not using phrases like repetition of we throughout the whole site, because again, psychologically it sounds like you're talking about yourself and not like your audience. So it's more you care about what your audience wants to do. It's subtle shifts in the way you write things. But
so in terms of like SEO, because obviously every website, the order of information, we're a branding agency, so the order of information we hammer home all the time, that it needs to be priority hierarchy of information delivered at the right time. But say obviously you want to write a page for a website, so in terms of SEO, what's the importance of SEO? Should that be paramount above all else, or should it be the, like you said, telling a story? Or is it a combination of the both? And weight-wise, is it 80-20?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's a very good question. I think a lot of the time it's the thing that a lot of sites battle with and people get confused with, and people say, can you SEO my website, and can you do SEO? And obviously SEO is a broad spectrum, which could be a whole podcast or a multiple session of podcasts in itself. And it's not something you can just do to a website, because it's a vast amount of moving parts. It's like sort of a business that's suffering asking a marketing agency, market my website, or market my business, market my website, make us more profitable. It's not a kind of one fixed solution. There's multiple things you could do to make that happen. And I think with copy, it's the same. Copy is one part of your SEO, but obviously if you're writing solely for a human and it's very personable, very emotional copywriting, there's not many factual keywords in there. Google's then going to struggle to understand the context of what the page is about. So for search engines, you basically want to be considering the correct headings, the correct, very concise to the point headings that tell that search engine what this is about. And also, like we talked about earlier with ARIA's labels for screen readers, somebody that's panning through your site, if they can't see the visual stimulus, they just get the text. That text needs to be clear to them what they're reading about and what they're doing. And I think for me, that's a logic. And I know, as an agency, that's something we do. Is try and think, if nothing else was here, no images, no context, would I understand what I'm reading, and does it make sense to me? And I think if you can get that right, Google's going to be pretty happy with what you've got on the page.
But I need my pictures. I don't like.
You need your pictures. Yeah, I don't like looking. I don't like just reading books with no pictures. No, that's very true. And luckily we can add the pictures in. But I think as a rule of thumb, if you will, thinking of it without them is a good way of trying to approach that. And what we can do, which a lot of sites do, is have a kind of context title. So it tells you what the context of the section is, and then a more kind of friendly human title underneath. So you've got the best of both worlds, really. And
I guess it's not a case of, because we've seen it countless times where people cram the page with multiple keywords. So I guess, in Google's terms, search engine terms, that they don't really know what the page is about if you cram it full of keywords.
No, exactly. One key, generally one, possibly two keyword focus per page, which sounds like, well, what do I, if I want to rank more? It's like we said earlier. Well, then you've got to really not be lazy, and you've got to make another page and get that ranking for that other keyword. Because if you try and get too many keywords in one page, it's like we said earlier, Google's kind of thinking, well, there's loads of other people out there that have written dedicated pages on these keywords, and this is just one of 10 that you're trying to rank for. I'm not going to give someone your result. I'm going to go for someone that spent some time and effort making a dedicated page. And I think that's what it comes down to, where people misunderstand, why can't I cram a lot of keywords in one page? And then obviously if you do focus on one keyword but you cram that, it's based on the quality and the actual content itself. So no longer is just cramming the same keyword in the page 100 times.
1,000 times.
No, you're probably going to be a little bit stuck with that one, unfortunately, nowadays.
Every other word is your keyword.
Every other word is your keyword.
That'll work.
Yeah, we've seen it, haven't we? Unfortunately, it did work for a time, but now the rule of thumb is quality content and unique content is what people want, and what Google wants to deliver people. Because we have to remember, the search engine's purpose is to give someone the best result, and if they feel the best result is someone that's having people stay on their website longer, clicking on the website, they're always going to give them that result over someone that's got a very spammy page, which is adding no value to anyone's life.
Rightly.
Because it does attribute to the fact that someone's put more effort in than someone else. And I think, closing on this, that's what you said about the ChatGPT thing. I think ChatGPT's got many applications and it's very useful in many ways. But you've got to be mindful that if you're feeling like you've done something the quick way out, or there's been a kind of a lazy way of creating content, the chances are Google's going to know that, and it's going to think, you haven't written this yourself, it's not personable, it's not actually about your brand. It could apply to 100 brands because it's been generated by ChatGPT. I think that's the kind of takeaway message for that for me. But that's really content creation summed up, I think. Okay, so now on to stage 5, which is the development of a website. Development of a website essentially means what's supporting the back of the website. So what's it built on, what's the software, if you like, that's running it, of which we, as we said earlier, we would usually use WordPress. There are other things out there like Shopify. There's various software systems like Squarespace, Wix, Webflow, various ones like that, Framer, all the kinds of ones we spoke about in a previous podcast. So there's lots of options out there for you to use, different softwares, different systems. We would use WordPress because, as we said before, you'd own all the property of the website, the files of the website, the code, everything we create would be your property. So there'd be no hidden fees anywhere. There'd be no control from a company to say we want to put our rates up, we want to charge you more. You own that site, so that's why we've always gravitated towards that. So from a development point of view, we would always develop our sites in that platform.
Yeah, so I mean that's a crucial point really, that you own the website. So a lot of these systems like Shopify and Wix and others, if you really wanted to own your website and take it elsewhere, you want to evolve it, and also not pay monthly fees, then having a standalone system such as having it built by an agency such as ours would certainly be beneficial. That if you left us, hopefully you never will, but if you ever did, you could take that website with you, and it is an asset of your business.
Yeah.
You imagine if you had a business and then you wanted to do something with it, and somebody said, right, okay, where's the website? Well, actually, it's with Wix. You're going to need to get in contact with Wix and
continue paying their rates. Yeah, and the rates have gone up last month. You've got to pay their new rates, and they actually own the website. And
it can go up, as we've seen. That it can go up exponentially, like month on month.
Yeah.
You'd be paying far more, possibly, than you would have done if you just built it as a standalone thing.
Exactly.
So there's definitely benefits of building a system with an agency or web agency or design agency such as ours, as opposed to using Wix. But as Rob touched on, we've explained all that in another podcast. So
we have. So we don't want to repeat too much of that. But it's not just Wix. Webflow, Framer, they offer fantastic software, and the service is fantastic. But as a moral compass for an agency, we have to try and kind of align ourselves to something. And I think what we've always done and what we always said is we recommend what we would want given to us, and that would be that we own the website. There's no hidden fees, and obviously you still have to host the site with us, but then you've got us looking after the site, you've got our hosting fees. We're not going to just throw them up overnight or throw some new fees on you that you didn't expect. Everything's been pre-agreed, and we will adhere to whatever we've agreed with you. So I think that's the difference. And also, like Paul said, if you did leave, the site's built in a way that another agency could pick it up. It's built semantically, it's your property, so there's lots of benefits there to why you'd spend that extra time doing that. But again, like we alluded to earlier in the earlier stages, still there's not a huge amount of money investment in the development side compared to the other phases of the website, which are crucial in making it work. But it will collapse if it's on a platform that you can't transfer to someone else, or you can't bring with you if you decide not to want to use it anymore. And the majority of the platforms out there are all built on softwares that only they will support. So if you left them, you've got essentially a site that you can't really do much with. You'd have to have it redesigned, you'd have to have it rebuilt. So we're looking at trying to develop something that's future proof, that can scale, that's on a hosting platform that can scale, so that it literally complements you as you grow as a business. I think that's the absolute paramount focus for us from a development point of view. And aside from that, it's again ensuring good practice, like we said earlier, good housekeeping, good structure in the back end. So if someone needs to jump into the site, or someone from one of our clients wants to edit something in the site, they know where to go. We've created a place for them to do that, and everyone knows where to go and what to find.
I mean that's a crucial thing. I mean the updates alone, if you have issues with your website, you can contact us. We'll sort it out generally same day. But if you've got to go through Wix and Shopify or whatever system you're using, and you need to raise a ticket,
it takes ages.
I mean, we know clients that have used those systems in the early stages of their development and then come to us, and they said it's fine when it's working, but if they need to update it, need to upgrade the website, add extra functionality, there's problems with it, trying to get that resolved, it just takes forever.
100%.
So the benefits are obviously having a site developed for your business. You own it fundamentally. It's easier to update it, and you can take it wherever you want.
100%. It's your property. I mean, we do work on sites with Shopify, but as we've said in the other podcast, you've got the hidden fees. you're reliant on external apps which are made by external developers. That's the only way Shopify can expand the functionality. You've then got fees to pay those developers. You've got problems with them. If the site goes down, if the app stops working, you've got to contact another developer. So there's always pitfalls in all the other systems. Whereas with WordPress, obviously, if you're not careful and you install loads of plugins, you can create problems for people. You can create risks. But we would use always the same list of set plugins that we test and that we vet, so that we make sure that whatever's there and whatever's updating, we know is safe and going to work. Yeah, exactly. And not just have to rely on hammering 30, 40 plugins on a website to get it to do quite basic things, which is again something we see too often. And why sites go down and why sites have problems is the developer again has put too many plugins on. They don't know what they are and they break.
And they slow the site down.
And often incur extra costs, because you'll very rarely nowadays get a free plugin that will do a lot of things for your website without you having to pay for it. So again, another benefit of using an agency like ours is we've got those licenses in place already, so we can pass that across to the clients and give them a lot of functionality for the same cost we would give any other client for the same hosting.
Because we're nice like that. And also you can benefit from us, having that license in place. So there are many benefits there that were you not to host, you'd have to pay all those fees on top of whatever we basically charge you annually for the hosting. So we try and make that as easy as possible. But essentially that's the development summed up in a nutshell, I think, in terms of how we deal with that. So the next phase is testing, a very important phase. So typically when we build a website, we'll generally hand it over to the client probably a couple of weeks before it's due to go live, and we'll do our own testing ahead of that. But generally we put it into a testing phase just so that we can iron out everything our end, make sure the buttons and everything, the navigation and everything is working how we expect it to, and then, as I say, hand it over to our clients who equally do a thorough testing process as well, to make sure that what we've gone through, very collaborative process, but what we've gone through is aligning to what we've agreed, what we set out to do, has all the elements in there that they expect to see, and equally just looking through the navigation and making sure the buttons work, all the text is in the right places, all the imagery is aligned as we set out. So just making sure that it's got been road tested, if you like, so before it's launched into the ether. So that's essentially a testing phase is very, very important.
It is. We
can iron out all the bugs and nuances ahead of the public getting hold of it.
That's pretty much it. So just to add to that would be from an email point of view, so any forms or any systems, we've got some clients that run simple forms, contact forms, newsletter forms, those kind of things that maybe need to link up to marketing services like Klaviyo or MailChimp, those kinds of forms. Then we've got more advanced forms for kind of quizzes that we use for some clients. So you've got the multi-step form, you've got the multi-quiz. So essentially you've got stage 1, stage 2, stage 3, and then there'll be a response from that, and then making sure that the client's receiving those emails, that the customer's getting those emails. Any kinds of forms like that really, or downloadables where we want to capture information, we need to be making sure just before we go live that the correct people are being informed of that. And that would usually involve using a very tested and safe mail service. So we would use Mailgun normally, or Postmark, which would be the two kind of tested safe mail services we'd use. So where other companies may not use safe or secure mail servers, and other website companies in particular, so like Wix or Squarespace, they use their own mail servers, so they ask you to link up to them. But you need a safe and secure mail server. If you just let the website send on its own, it can get blacklisted, it can go in spam, people can't receive the emails, your customers don't receive the emails. So it's really important that we test and we set up secure sending services like that, and that people that are subscribing to newsletters or using our forms are getting added to MailChimp, getting added to Klaviyo. so that again we're collecting the correct marketing collateral that we need
Yeah.
moving forward. So that's really important, I think, from a testing point of view. And something I didn't mention in the development phase is creating the site dynamically. So that's basically ensuring that the content on the site is updated in one place and then the whole site updates from that content. So by doing that, what we're doing is basically making the testing phase slightly easier, because the links and the pages and the structure are all dynamically created. So there's nothing physically typed in where we can avoid it, which really helps with broken links and pages missing and things not linking through, because what we've done is created an actual physical dynamic link to that content. So if it gets changed or updated or the link's changed, it's still going to go through to the correct page. And I think that's something that's come on quite a long way in terms of development and websites in general, because before you used to get a lot of broken links on things and a lot of problems with buttons because everything was physically typed in. So we're helping, twofold. We're helping the client and the testing phase, because the client can then update their site and add links to their site and know that they're not always going to be breaking. So that makes everyone's life easier. So that's always something we try and do in all our sites essentially. But I think in terms of the testing phase, that's pretty much covered what we would do for that.
You just got to make sure that the testing phase is very thorough, because essentially once it's out into the ether and it's out in the public domain, what you don't want is your target audience contacting you saying this doesn't work.
No, that's
I
the last
clicked on
thing
that
you need.
button and it didn't take me anywhere. Just thorough testing. That's what you need to do.
100%, yeah. And also redirect. So if you're moving from an old site to a new site, you might want to consider redirect. So we would use softwares for that. We'd run your old site through the software, get a list of all the URLs, put them into the new site, basically queue them up so that make sure that if there's any pages that have moved or changed, we've covered for that, so that people aren't getting taken to non-existent or broken pages basically.
So after launching the website's now live. So this is like the next phase, really, the launch. So you need to ensure that the website is set up correctly. And one of those things ahead of it going live really is ensure that it's got a secure certificate. So quite often you'll see websites that have HTTPS at the beginning of their domain name. So if it doesn't have that, so it'll just be HTTP, generally that means it's not a secure website. So what does that mean? It means that with the S on the end, it means it's a secure, it's got an SSL certificate basically. So it means that that website is secure. So from the end user's perspective, and from a Google's perspective as well, search engine perspective, it means that site has been made in a way that is very secure. So from a target audience perspective, not so many people look at it because they're unaware of this HTTPS, if you like, of what that really means. But it does mean if the people do know it and can see it, it's a trustworthy website. So it's not been made by Joe Blogs on an unsecure server. It's not going to get hacked. It's not going to take your information. So making sure it's got the HTTPS, I'll get it right in a minute. Having that SSL certificate is really important to ensuring that your website is very secure and aids that trust building. So once that site's live, it's out into the ether. And if you've gone through the proper process of the testing phase, then really there should be no other issues with the website.
No.
It's then just really then trying to measure how effective that website is. So this harks back to areas that we touched on earlier about SEO and things like that, making sure that that's all measured. You just want to make sure that when that website's launched, that you shout about it as well. It's something to be very proud of. Shout about it on your socials or wherever.
And that's pretty much a summary of the launch. Would also include sort of things like making sure your SEO's in place, which it should be before you launch anyway. So you've got meta descriptions, titles, things like that, which should be already in place, so that when Google starts to index your site, everything's right and everything's correct. So that's really important. Fundamental things like we would always tally up a site with Google Analytics, and nowadays Plausible as well, because it's very good at tracking, and it kind of helps with cookies, because cookies and GDPR is huge in the UK, and it makes it very difficult for us to get tracking. So we would always install Google Analytics, Google Search Console, and as I say, generally Plausible now as well, so that helps a huge amount with tracking. Submit the new sitemap, so Google needs to know that your site's launched, so you would tell it, you'd submit a new sitemap, you'd say this is our new sitemap, have a look at it. You do that through Search Console, so that's again something we would do as a standard as part of the launch. And like Paul said, obviously if you, even more so if you've got an e-commerce site, that you make sure you've got your SSL certificate sorted, because the last thing you want is an unsecure connection on your website when people are visiting you, because Google will punish you, it will rank you down, and as soon as you visit the site you'll get a warning as well to let you know it's unsecure. So Google is very unforgiving of sites that aren't secure, and there's no excuse for it nowadays, because you can do it with so many free things out there which will give you SSL certificates. There's no reason not to do it, but it's part of the launch, so that would be something we'd make sure is done.
So we're on to the next phase, which is maintenance and update. That's again a very important phase, and just letting your website sit there, it always needs to be looked at. So that's one of the things that we do with all our clients, is talk to them about a regular maintenance and update program.
Absolutely.
So the updates in particular is really important from a front end kind of perspective, making sure that there's new content on the site. It could be news articles, it could be additional pages of information, updating images, just trying to keep the website fresh. So not just from a search engine perspective and making sure it's ranked, because the more frequently you update it, then Google sees that as being, like a very engaging website. But also from your target audience, if they're an existing customer, let's say, and they're going to keep going back to your website for whatever reason, they just need to make sure that that content is looking fresh. They don't want to go on your website in a year's time and find that absolutely nothing has changed.
No.
Because why would they go back there then thereafter? So just making sure that the updates are done on a regular basis. And we can set this up for our clients in particular, where we work in multitude of ways where we can update the website for them. They can supply us with a text and images if it's a news article, blog information, or a new page, or new form, or whatever. Or we can do that for them. There's a few of our clients where we tell them what the content should be, ask them for images and things like that, and then we update the content for them. So but just keeping the website updated is really critical.
Yeah, absolutely. I think just to add to that, it would be like Paul said, we would work with clients to help them update sites if they struggle with things. We'll make it easier for them to do those things themselves. Some clients have internal marketing teams, others don't. Some are very competent with certain aspects and others not so much.
Some are not.
Majority are probably in the not camp, and they would need us to kind of lend a hand, certainly from keeping design consistency and content consistency, because it's like we said earlier, if you're not a copywriter and you're not a graphic designer, then are you best suited to be adding new images and new copy to your website? And it really comes down to the same as any discipline where somebody is skilled in their trade or their skill set is, would you let somebody else do that ongoing if it's not really their remit? And I think that's where we try and assess that, again, part of the planning, part of the ongoing. If a client has got the team in-house, or they are very confident and we can work with them, then obviously very happy to do that, and that's the client's choice.
And I mean, even if they're not, We have on numerous situations where, we've done a video for them
Yeah.
to show them how to do it
Yeah,
in
yeah.
the way that we would do it.
Mm-hmm.
Or sometimes we've had people either on site and we train them
Yeah.
to say this is the way that we generally do it.
Yeah.
These are the things you need to consider, like typography. Images need to be sized, correctly. These kind of pixel resolutions, and naming the images correctly. All these kind of things, so we can train people if they really need it, so that they can update it themselves. But as you
Yes.
say, I mean, we've got those skills, so why not utilize that? But if you want to do more things in-house, then why not ask us to help you?
Yeah, I think it can be a combination of one or the other, or literally just one or the other. I think that's the best way of working, and it can suit different businesses with different needs. In terms of kind of design styles, we do everything we can to kind of lock down the design and create a framework that's very consistent and very safe across the site. But that still doesn't mean that that's going to fill in the gaps for uses of color, or the what's written, or the titles. Are they SEO focused? Is the copy written well enough? Is it too convoluted? Is it too drawn out? Are the images formatted correctly? Are they edited? Do they look good? I think there's elements in there that there's lots of variables still when other people are updating the content, which is got to be mindful of if you spent a good amount of money.
So
on
what
the
you're
site.
saying is leave it to the experts.
Yeah, in a roundabout way, yeah, if you can. But budgeting up front for a return on investment to allow for the time and the spend for us to do those things ongoing. And complement with our marketing team. So our marketing team and department would be reporting on analytics, on the effectiveness of the site, keeping lids on all the pages you've created, on the landing pages, making sure they're delivering. So it makes perfect sense that if there's a problem there, or if there's something they see that could be better or improved, or you want to focus on an SEO campaign to say be more found in Exeter or Plymouth or the Southwest, then our analytics can lend insights into how we can help that site do that. And I think that's again where we're proactively doing that. If you're using us for maintenance and updates and ongoing, that's where we can be proactive in bringing those things up, whereas a busy business wouldn't be looking at that.
I mean, it's also it's how much do you value your time. If it's not your day-to-day,
absolutely,
and it's distracting you,
that's it.
So it might take you 6 hours, let's say, to update a page on the website. It might take us 1 hour. So is that worth your time?
Correct.
Spending time trying to find out how to do this, or did I size it correctly? Oops, I accidentally deleted that page. What do I do? I'll get on the phone, blah blah blah. Whereas send us an email with an image, with some text. We can evaluate the text. Is it SEO friendly? Is it talking tone of voice, on brand? Is the image sized correctly? Can we enhance the image for you? Yes, we can. Let's upload that for you.
Exactly.
Job done in
Couple
half the
work.
time. And it's how much you value your time, basically.
And what the website's doing, like we said, which we'd look to assess with that individual client on a website by website basis, really. But it should complement everything, and obviously we'd ordinarily be doing other things for that client, not just web services, so the whole account would be moving in the same direction, and paying us to do things which, like Paul said, would take an hour, 2 hours here and there. Would the intention would be that they'd bring return on investment, they'd be more engaging, people would click on them more, whereas if you try and do it in-house, and you hash it up, you have to come to us anyway, and then we have to change it. You've wasted your time. Who really benefits from it? And I think it's having that foresight of, right, we're going to spend X amount over X period of time and see the following results. I think that's the way you've got to look at it. But that's maintenance and updates really in a nutshell.
So that concludes our episode on building a website and the various stages. So I hope you enjoyed it, and look forward to the next episode coming soon.
Hope you found it useful. Thanks, guys.
Cheers.
Cheers.